I never imagined that my spring picnic would end this way. My boyfriend and I decided to go out to a place further away from the city, that isolated park we have always been, for the peace it offers. It was just the two of us, enjoying the beginning of the season, with the gentle breeze and the smell of flowers. The idea was to have a simple picnic and enjoy the day. During the afternoon, we posted some photos, laughed, talked about plans, and turned off our cell phones, trying to enjoy the moment without the distractions of the world. Everything was quiet, as always, and I didn't expect it to be our last memory of a normal day. The daylight went away faster than I remembered. When the sky started to get dark, we decided it was time to leave. The atmosphere around seemed different, as if something had changed, but I didn't think much about it. I was getting our things, and the moment I started to put everything in the car, something caught my attention, a black car which passed slowly near where we were. I didn't give much importance, after all, the park always had people coming and going. But even so, something in the air was tense. My memory of what happened after that is nebulous. The last thing I clearly remember is a feeling of dizziness, a whirlwind, and then simply, I woke up alone on the floor, near the parking lot. I was down with sore arms, but the strangest thing was to look around and see that my boyfriend's car was still there. But he wasn't. I was paralyzed for a few seconds, not understanding what was happening. The first thing I did was drag myself to the car, hoping to see my boyfriend in there, but no. The car was empty, and there was no sign of it anywhere around. The sky was already completely dark, and the silence of that place only made my heart beat faster. I tried to call his cell phone, but there was no signal. When I finally managed to get up, my legs were shaking, and I was dizzy, almost as if I had been doped, but I didn't remember anything that could have caused this. I just knew he wasn't there, and that gave me a tightness in my chest that I couldn't describe. I went to the parking lot, with the confused thought, trying to understand what had happened. I went to the point where my boyfriend and I had stayed and looked around, hoping to see something that would give me an explanation. There were no signs of struggle, nothing out of place. As if he had simply disappeared, leaving no trace. I looked at the park's security cameras, which were strategically positioned around the parking lot. They hadn't captured anything. No image of people arriving or leaving, and the strangest of all, no one seemed to have noticed anything. How is this possible? How come no one saw anything strange? I was starting to panic, but I tried to stay calm. I took a deep breath and called the police, explaining what had happened. They took a while to arrive, and while I waited, I started walking around the area, looking for any clue that could help me understand what was happening. The only thing I found was a piece of torn fabric stuck in a tree, as if someone had been pulled hard. It wasn't my boyfriend's, but the idea that someone had taken him made me even more terrified. When the police arrived, they didn't take long to start asking the questions. But what left me most grounded was when one of the officers asked about the black truck. A man who was passing by the road said he saw a black car, a truck model, parking next to our picnic, watching us. The description was very similar to that of another disappearance that had occurred the previous month, just a few kilometers away. The coincidence was bizarre. I didn't know what else to think. I was there alone, in the same place where all this happened, and I had no idea where my boyfriend was. I went back to the picnic spot, trying to gather all the possible memories. The feeling of being observed was unbearable, but the strangest thing is that when I tried to focus on the details of that day, my mind seemed to block some parts. The black car, the truck, the man, everything seemed to be shuffled. I remembered hearing the car engine, but soon after everything became a blur. A kind of mental confusion that I couldn't explain. In the following days, the investigators searched, but found nothing. What bothered me the most was the fact that the park's security camera, which should have filmed everything, didn't record anything. It was as if the moment had been erased. They still tried to pull images from other cameras in the region, but again, nothing. My boyfriend didn't have social networks, he didn't have problems with anyone, he was quiet. But he just disappeared. The only clue left was the black truck, the same as another disappearance. And no matter how hard they tried, no one could find out what really happened that day. I felt strange, as if I were in a nightmare that never ended. The police still questioned the man who saw the man in the truck, but he seemed confused, as if he didn't know for sure what he had witnessed. It was the kind of thing that made anyone uncomfortable. The man had nothing else to say, unless he saw the vehicle stop near where we were. But the most bizarre thing was that he mentioned that he couldn't remember the sign. How can someone forget something like that? I know I could never do it, but he seemed genuine. There were days of anguish and waiting. But as time passed, I began to notice something even more disturbing. I felt like I was being watched all the time. Sometimes, I could swear I heard footsteps behind me, or someone calling me softly by my name. But whenever I turned around, there was no one. On one of those occasions, I decided to go back to the park, trying to remember something, anything that could make sense. But the place was even more empty, dark. When I went to the exact point where we were, the same sensations came to the fore. The presence, the look. It was as if something was still there, waiting, watching. I didn't know what to think. Part of me wanted to believe that it was just my mind, trying to give explanations for what had no answers. But another part knew that something was wrong, very wrong. When talking to some of the park's employees, I learned that there were more disappearances over the years, things that no one talked about much, but were there, recorded in some part of the investigations. Most people who were alone, or couples like me and my boyfriend. But these stories were never really resolved. Nobody talked about them, and when someone mentioned it, it was soon forgotten. The strangest thing was one night, a few weeks later. I was at home, alone, when I received an anonymous message, just with a photo. It was an image of the park, of the exact place where we had the picnic. And in the photo, a silhouette of a man was standing out in the shadows. He was looking in my direction. My heart froze. Fear took over me in a way I had never experienced. At that time, I learned that my boyfriend's disappearance was not a coincidence. He knew, or at least felt, that something was happening, something I couldn't understand yet. The feeling of being watched, which I used to ignore, became unbearable. I began to look behind myself, on the streets, in the places I used to frequent. At every corner, at every move of someone, I asked myself, is it him? Is it the same man in the photo? I had the impression that he was following me, watching every step I took. It didn't take long for me to start feeling that something else was behind all this. And the worst? I couldn't prove anything. Then one night, while trying to sleep, I heard a strange noise coming from the window. Something like soft but determined steps. I got up immediately and went to the window. I didn't see anyone, but the feeling that I was being watched was so strong that I could barely breathe. This happened every night, always at the same hours, always with the same intensity. I was on the verge of losing my sanity, living in this state of constant alertness and fear, not knowing who to trust or even what to do. Paranoia began to take over me. I no longer knew if I was going crazy or if there was really something going on. I remembered the words of that gentleman in the park, what he had said about the man with the black truck. I began to question myself if there was something much bigger happening than I imagined. So I decided to go to the police station once again. I didn't believe much in investigations anymore, but something inside me told me that I needed to keep looking for answers. I went to the police station, and this time, I made an effort to talk directly to the detective responsible for the case. I explained again what I had lived, the details of the night my boyfriend disappeared, and mentioned what you had said about the black truck. He seemed more receptive than before, maybe because I was more desperate. He asked me to report everything, including any strange feeling, as if I was almost trying to reconstruct the events more accurately. After this conversation, he promised me that he would investigate further. I didn't know if it gave me hope or just more fear. The days passed, and I began to drown in the memories of that day. What disturbed me the most was not only the fact that I woke up alone in the parking lot, but the hours that were missing in my memory. The feeling of having been withdrawn somehow gave me chills, as if time had been manipulated, as if someone had taken me out of that reality for a moment, only to give me back later, without any explanation. Every time I tried to remember what happened, I felt a pressure in my head, a mental block that prevented me from seeing clearly. That's when the detective contacted again. He told me he found something related to the black truck. But what he told me made my heart stop for a moment. The truck you had mentioned, apparently, was associated with a series of disappearances in the region. However, what shocked me the most was the conclusion that the disappearances occurred with a pattern. The victims, all of them, were in isolated places, like me and my boyfriend, and in all cases, someone seemed to have been removed from their homes or from their resting places, as if they were abducted, but without leaving a trace. The police were taking the necessary measures, but I felt that nothing would make sense until I found my boyfriend. Every day that passed, I felt more lost. My conversations with the police seemed not to advance, and the clues, always vague, only increased my sense of impotence. The park's security images had not recorded anything relevant. The people who were there on the same day seemed to know nothing, or maybe they were afraid to talk. I began to question myself if there was something else, something I wasn't seeing or understanding correctly. But one thing consumed me. What happened during those hours that I didn't remember? It was then that, at some dawn, while reviewing old photos and text messages with my boyfriend, I found a message from him that made me freeze. It was a picture he had taken of our picnic, but there was something in the image that I didn't remember. In the background, almost imperceptible, it was possible to see a figure on the edge of the tree. A man. The man in the truck. I almost fell back when I realized what that meant. He was there, watching, and I didn't know. From the beginning, he was watching. The next day, I went to the police station with the photo in hand. I showed it to the police, and for the first time, I saw a real reaction. They told me that if that was really the man in the truck, things could take a different turn. They asked me to try to remember any detail, anything that could have escaped my mind. But no matter how hard I tried, all I had were fragments and a feeling of emptiness. I knew that my boyfriend wasn't going to show up alone, that something terrible had happened, but no one knew where to look. I went to the park again, but this time it wasn't to look for clues, it was to confront my own fears. I needed to feel that place again, relive every second, every movement I had made that day. The park was quiet, strange, and the scenery seemed even emptier than I remembered. I sat in the same place where we were, trying to remember something. And then a strong breeze passed, making a leaf roll to my foot. The wind brought with it something I couldn't explain, a feeling that someone was watching me again, but this time I was alone. I stayed there for a while, the emptiness around me consuming me. I looked around, hoping to find some clue, something that would bring me a sense of security. But there was nothing. Then, a shadow moved into the distance. It wasn't a person, but it looked like something that moved in the opposite direction to my gaze, as if it was moving away from me, hiding in the trees. My heart shot. I looked everywhere, but nothing. Just the sound of the wind. That's when I realized there was something wrong. It was no longer about finding answers, but about what I already knew. He wouldn't come back. I was starting to accept this. The police had no more updates, and little by little, hope vanished. The days passed, and I could no longer deal with the unanswered questions. When I looked at my cell phone, I saw that one of the photos we took that day had something strange. In the background, almost imperceptible, there was the silhouette of a man. It was hard to believe what my eyes were seeing. It was the man in the black truck. That moment, the last record I had, was haunting me. I don't know what happened to him, nor what happened to me. His disappearance remained unexplained, and what I saw in the park, then, only confirmed what I feared all the time. Whatever happened that day was not by chance. But the strangest thing of all is that until today, no one else has seen or heard about that man or the black truck. Have you ever been through a situation in which you felt you were being followed or watching something strange? Leave your report in the comments. I never thought I'd go through something like this. A group of friends and I decided to rent a country house to celebrate the end of winter and enjoy the quiet spring weather. The place was isolated, surrounded by trees and a wonderful view. On the first night, everything was perfect. We chatted, laughed, drank a little, and enjoyed the peace. There was no sign that something strange could happen. But, as always, the tranquility of an isolated place can hide the unexpected. On the second night, we began to hear footsteps coming from the attic. We thought it was some kind of animal, but it didn't. It was as if someone was walking there, going up and down the stairs. One of my friends, who was very skeptical about this kind of thing, swore he saw a shadow moving up there. We ran to the stairs and went up, but the attic was empty, and the feeling of being watched grew. We tried to ignore it and continued with the night, but something was not right. Last night, around 3 a.m., something happened that made us all tense. The house was in complete silence when, suddenly, the lights in the living room and kitchen turned on by themselves. No one had messed with the switches. We went there confused, trying to understand what was happening, but everything seemed normal, except for the lights on inexplicably. What scared us even more was that the house was well locked, with no signs that someone had entered. At that moment, the weather changed completely. Everyone was uncomfortable and with a chill in the spine. It was then that someone suggested that we check the security cameras on the balcony. We had never noticed them, but somehow, one of the cameras was recording. When we watched, we saw a figure walking down the trail behind the house, completely without explanation. We couldn't see details, but it looked like someone, not an animal. We were silent for a few seconds, not knowing what to say. The tension was so palpable that no one could sleep after that. The feeling of being observed now was constant. The next day, there was no discussion. We packed our bags and left before sunrise. We were too scared to wait. On the way back, we tried to understand what had happened, but it didn't make sense. The company that rented the house assured that no one had entered, that the property was safe, and that the cameras did not record anything strange. But the recording was still on my cell phone. The image was blurry, but clearly you could see the figure leaving the trail, as if it were watching us or waiting for something. Something we can't explain to this day. I never told the story to many people, because whenever someone asked about the weekend, I just answered that it was better to forget. Today, I still have the feeling that something or someone was there, and maybe they didn't leave with us. When I think about what happened, I still feel uncomfortable, as if we were being watched all the time. I don't know what that was, but the recording is the only proof that we weren't imagining things. And honestly, this scares me more than anything else. If anyone has ever been through something similar, or if you know what it may have been, I would love to hear it. I've always liked walking alone on the trail near my house. It was a routine that gave me peace, especially with the arrival of spring, when the flowers began to color the path. I felt free and calm, as if that was my little refuge. At first, everything was normal, until one day, I noticed that there were cut flowers thrown next to the trail, scattered in a way that it looked like a path, as if someone was following me. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, but then I started to see more flowers on the second day, and on the third, a flower was tied to the handle of my car. There was no note or explanation, but that lonely flower gave me a chill. The next day, the flower appeared again, but this time with a note tied next to it. "You are beautiful walking here." My stomach gave an instant knot. I felt the fear growing. Who was leaving these flowers and why? I changed the path of my walk, but the feeling of being watched did not go away. On the contrary, with every step I took, it seemed that there was someone following me. I began to see shadows moving behind parked cars, and my heart raced every time I felt something strange. I didn't know if it was paranoia or something else, so I decided to call the police. The police arrived quickly, but the fear had not yet passed. They started searching the area around the trail, but didn't find anything right away. When they began to question the neighbors, one of them mentioned having seen a small tent in the woods, but no one knew whose it was. I was trying to stay calm, but the thought that someone had followed me for so long was unbearable. The next day, the police came back to further investigate the area. A few minutes later, they called me saying they had found something. I went there and saw the tent hidden among the trees. My heart raced. Inside the tent, there were empty bottles, dirty clothes, and food scraps scattered on the floor. But what terrified me the most was a notebook, open in the middle of the tent. When flipping through it, I realized that the pages were full of records of my walking schedules, my daily movements, even the hours I spent on the trail. The pages were full of notes about what I was wearing, how I behaved, and even the number of steps I took. But the worst of all were the photos. Photos of me, taken from afar, with a long-range camera. I didn't know what to feel, if relief for finally knowing the origin of the feeling of being watched, or terror for knowing that this person had been watching me for so long without me noticing. The police were as shocked as I was. They took the notebook and the photos for analysis, but what disturbed me the most was the fact that no one knew who could be behind it. There were no clues about the person responsible for the tent, or how he knew so much about me. I was asked about who could have access to my routine, but I really didn't know. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of the photos, with the person watching me while I walked, was engraved in my mind. And the shadows I began to see on the street, behind the cars, made me feel like I was being followed. It was as if the person was still close, watching me, waiting for the right moment to act. After a few weeks, the police informed me that they had found no more clues about who was behind the tent, and the investigations were stopped. I tried to move forward, but I could never walk alone on the trail again. The feeling of being observed persisted. Sometimes, when passing through that area, I could swear that there was still someone there, waiting, hidden in the shadows. I didn't tell anyone about the note on the door handle of my car. I didn't want to scare anyone else. But I know what I saw, and I know someone was there watching me. To this day, I don't know who it was, nor what I really wanted. I just know that my peace ended at that moment, and spring was never the same for me.